From Magnum PI to Blue Bloods and more, actor Tom Selleck has ascended to heights he never imagined. Now he's taking in the view with our Tracy Smith.
When you think of Hollywood legends who made rugged charm and art form, two names always rise to the top: Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott. They weren't just actors, they were the embodiment of the American cowboy dream. For decades, fans have wondered, were they rivals, friends, or something more complex? The comparisons were constant, the mystery never settled. But in 2024, Tom Selleck finally broke his silence. In his memoir, You Never Know, and a series of rare interviews, he spoke about Sam Elliott in a way that no one expected. What he revealed didn't just redefine their friendship, it uncovered a quiet truth that had been building since the 1960s. The ballet class nobody knew about. It's almost impossible to think of Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott, two of Hollywood's most rugged cowboy-like icons, doing ballet together. But that's exactly what happened back in the 1960s, when both men were just starting out in the industry. Before the fame, before the mustaches, before the westerns, there were ballet shoes, mirrors, and stretching exercises at 20th Century Fox's New Talent program. During an interview with Town & Country, Selleck laughed as he shared the story. He talked about Elliott being right there with him, both of them trying to follow instructions that didn't match anything they would eventually be known for. The idea of Sam Elliott in tights was enough to make Selleck pause, because even he knew it sounded unreal. Yet it happened, and once he said it publicly, people couldn't stop talking about it. It wasn't just the humor of it, it was the fact that it peeled back the curtain on two men who had built careers on toughness and stoic charm. At that time, Fox's New Talent program was like a finishing school for young actors. The studio wanted their contract players to be more than just faces on the screen. They expected them to be adaptable, polished, and ready for any kind of role. So they were trained in everything: voice work, movement, acting techniques, fencing, diction, and yes, even dance. Ballet wasn't optional. It was part of the curriculum. For actors like Selleck and Elliott, who would one day be known for playing cowboys, sheriffs, and rugged loners, ballet wasn't exactly the dream scenario they imagined when they were trying to break into Hollywood. But that was the point of the program. It put actors into situations that forced them to understand their physical presence, improve their balance, and learn how to use their bodies as tools for performance. Studios believed that if you could get through ballet, the discipline, the posture, the coordination, you could handle almost anything in front of a camera. And decades later, both men would quietly admit that those lessons stuck with them, even if neither ever stepped foot in a ballet studio again. Selleck could have shared plenty of stories about those early days: the endless auditions, the small television gigs, the uncertain paycheck-to-paycheck hustle. He could have talked about the cowboy sets he started working on, or the awkwardness of his early commercial appearances, but he chose to talk about that ballet class. And that says something. It wasn't just a funny anecdote. It was a small moment that captured something much bigger: humility, vulnerability, and a shared beginning that both men carried with them long after they'd become stars. Those classes weren't glamorous by any stretch. The room was usually too bright, the mirrors showed every mistake, and the teacher didn't care who you were or who you thought you might become. Everyone was treated the same, and everyone struggled. Selleck and Elliott were both tall, both athletic, and both visibly out of place in that environment, but neither walked out. They showed up, did the work, and tried to find rhythm in a setting that had nothing to do with the tough guy image they'd one day embody. What Selleck didn't mention in that interview, but would later elaborate on, is what he noticed about Elliott even back in those ballet classes. There was something different about the lanky guy with the deep voice, something that would become clear only decades later. The observation that changed everything. Back in those early Fox days, Tom Selleck noticed something about Sam Elliott that most people probably didn't catch. While the rest of the young actors were still trying on different personas, figuring out how to stand out, or worrying about which roles would make them look versatile, Elliott had a quiet certainty about himself. There was a steadiness in the way he carried himself, a calm assurance that seemed almost unusual for someone just starting in Hollywood. He wasn't experimenting with gimmicks, flamboyance, or trying to fit into whatever mold the studio was pushing at the time. He was grounded, and there was a sense that he already knew the kind of actor he wanted to become. In the 1960s, that kind of self-possession wasn't just rare, it was almost unheard of. Hollywood loved new actors who could shapeshift on demand. Chameleons were the ones who thrived, the ones who could disappear into any genre, any style, any type of story. One week you might be in a comedy, the next in a musical, then a crime drama after that. The studios encouraged it because they wanted control over their actors. The idea was simple. A malleable actor could fit anywhere, sell anything, and help maximize profit. Versatility was currency. Elliott didn't buy into any of it. Right from the start, he leaned into the Western archetype, the tall, lean figure with a deep, commanding voice, calm but magnetic, the man who says little and makes every word count. While others were chasing roles in a dozen directions, trying to prove they could be anything, he was perfecting something else entirely: authenticity. He wasn't trying to impress anyone with range. He was focused on mastering a single style and doing it exceptionally well. There's a quiet bravery in that choice, because in a town obsessed with reinvention, choosing to stay consistent is a risk of its own. Of course, outsiders might have seen it differently. For years, some casting directors or producers probably thought he was holding himself back. Where others were landing romantic leads, flashy roles, or big-budget films, Elliott was often the supporting guy, the cowboy, the soldier, the quiet presence in the background, who somehow dominated a scene without needing to shout. His career wasn't climbing the conventional ladder, but there was a different kind of weight in his performances, a presence that spoke louder than his lines. Selleck, even in those early days, must have noticed the contrast. Did Elliott's approach seem daring or foolhardy? Was it quiet confidence, instinct, or just luck that he would eventually find his place in Hollywood? Selleck didn't spell it out at the time, but the impression clearly stuck with him. There's something unforgettable about watching someone know exactly who they are when everyone around them is still trying to be everything at once. Time only made that early observation more meaningful. Years later, when Selleck's career exploded, he became a household name almost overnight, and Elliott's path remained quieter and slower. The significance of those Fox days became clear. Maybe it wasn't just about acting style or career strategy anymore. Maybe it was about patience, resilience, and a kind of long-term thinking that Hollywood rarely rewards immediately. It was about the courage to stick to your instincts, to measure success on your own terms, and to weather the ups and downs without losing your center. Because what Selleck saw back then was something deeper than a choice about roles or style. It was a blueprint for longevity, for integrity, and for defining your career around who you are rather than what the market demands. One man became a global television star quickly, riding a wave of visibility and fame. The other chose a slower, steadier route, becoming respected, enduring, and quietly iconic in his own right. And that early observation, the one that started with a lanky young actor who seemed unusually grounded, set the stage for everything that came next between them. It explains the respect Selleck would carry for Elliott, the recognition of authenticity over conventional success, and the subtle influence Elliott had on how Selleck himself approached his career. Their paths were different, but that moment in the Fox studio, watching Elliott quietly know who he was, became a defining point for Selleck, a lesson that would take decades to fully appreciate. And as their careers unfolded, it became clear that Hollywood success isn't always about speed or headline fame. Sometimes it's about the quiet certainty of knowing yourself and letting your work speak. So what happened next between these two paths? How did their careers intersect, diverge, and eventually inform each other in ways nobody expected? That's where the story really starts to get fascinating. When Selleck's career exploded and Elliott's didn't. By the early 1980s, Tom Selleck was standing on the edge of superstardom. He was in that rare place where the right role could turn him into a household name overnight. And in a way, that's exactly what happened. But not without a twist. Around that time, Steven Spielberg offered him a role that could have changed everything: the lead in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yes, the very same role that would eventually make Harrison Ford one of the most recognizable movie stars in the world. For almost any actor, this is the kind of opportunity you dream about. A chance to go from television recognition to global film superstardom in one sweep. But there was a catch. Selleck had already signed a contract for a brand new CBS series called Magnum P.I. The show hadn't even aired yet. Nobody knew if it would be a hit, or if it would tank and disappear after a season. The network wasn't willing to release him, and Selleck made a quiet decision to honor the commitment he had made. No lawsuits, no drama, just a matter of principle. He chose to stick with his word, rather than gamble everything on a single opportunity, even one that would become legendary. When the news came out, it caused a stir. Entertainment journalists couldn't believe it. Some called it the biggest career misstep in Hollywood history. Others praised him for integrity, but assumed he'd regret it forever. Harrison Ford went on to become an international superstar. Meanwhile, Selleck's He Passed on Indiana Jones story became a favorite Hollywood what-if, endlessly speculated on in articles, interviews, and fan conversations. People debated endlessly about what could have been, but while everyone was focused on the blockbuster that got away, something else was quietly happening. Something that revealed a lot more about Tom Selleck's values and instincts as both an actor and a person. In 1979, just before Magnum P.I. hit the airwaves, Selleck worked on a Western miniseries called The Sackets. This wasn't a flashy Hollywood production. It wasn't the kind of project that would guarantee fame or accolades. But for Selleck, it became surprisingly formative. He starred alongside Sam Elliott, and that experience left an impression that would influence him for decades. It wasn't just about acting. It was about the lifestyle, the environment, and the way the work felt honest and grounded. Riding horses, being outdoors, interacting with a natural landscape, it reminded him why he had loved acting in the first place. That Western world, quiet and deliberate, started to shape his choices. Fame was about to come knocking in a big way, but he didn't let it sweep him off his feet. When Magnum P.I. premiered and he became a television superstar almost overnight, he maintained a connection to the Western lifestyle, to authenticity, and to the things that gave him balance. Even as millions recognized his face and his mustache across television screens, he stayed true to what made him feel alive beyond the lights and cameras. By 1982, at the height of Magnum P.I.'s success, Selleck reunited with Elliott for another Western, The Shadow Riders. He didn't do it for fame or for money. He was already one of television's biggest stars. He did it because it spoke to something essential about who he was: a love for the genre, a desire to collaborate with someone he respected. and a chance to stay connected to authenticity in a profession that often demanded compromise. Meanwhile, Sam Elliott's career followed a very different rhythm. He wasn't headlining television shows or blockbuster films. He wasn't under the same level of public scrutiny. His path was slower, quieter, and more deliberate. He continued taking Western roles and character parts that fit his persona. Hollywood sometimes labeled him as narrow or too typecast, but Elliott didn't seem concerned. He wasn't chasing fame, nor was he trying to reinvent himself for casting directors. He built a career on consistency and integrity, on working within a space he believed in, and on becoming the actor he wanted to be. For Selleck, that must have been fascinating. While he navigated the pressures of stardom, the media attention, the expectations to jump into major film roles, the constant spotlight, he had a front-row view of someone living a different kind of success. Elliott wasn't trying to play the Hollywood game. He was steady, grounded, and seemingly content with the work he was doing. He had defined success on his own terms and stuck with it. That was a model of stability and integrity that even a rising star like Selleck couldn't help but notice. But while both men had found their rhythm in different ways, their careers were about to take another unexpected turn, one that would blur the lines between competition, admiration, and quiet brotherhood. The parallel lives they built. During the 1980s, while Tom Selleck was at the peak of his Magnum P.I. fame, he made a choice that left a lot of Hollywood people scratching their heads. Instead of buying another home in Los Angeles or chasing movie roles back-to-back, he bought a ranch, about 60 acres of avocado farmland in California. And this wasn't a fancy getaway or a photo op property. Selleck actually lived there. He worked the land, looked after the crops, and built a quiet rhythm that couldn't have been more different from the flashing cameras and red carpets. What made it even more surprising was how committed he was to that lifestyle. When Magnum P.I. ended, everyone expected him to move closer to the Hollywood scene, maybe set himself up for the big movie career people thought he'd missed after the Indiana Jones situation. But Selleck didn't move. He stayed right where he was, on the ranch. For him, it wasn't just land. It was peace. It was something solid in a world that constantly shifted. While other actors his age were attending premieres, meeting with agents, and jumping from one film set to another, Selleck was learning about irrigation lines, soil conditions, and the seasonal rhythms of avocado harvesting. The ranch wasn't work in the Hollywood sense, but it was work, real work, and it grounded him in a way nothing else could. Around the same time, Sam Elliott and his wife, actress Catherine Ross, were doing something similar. They had their own ranch in Malibu, a quiet, private space far removed from the Hollywood spotlight. Horses, wide open land, early mornings, quiet evenings. It wasn't about escaping fame, but choosing what kind of life to live within it. They weren't hiding from the industry. They were simply putting it in its proper place. Their home life wasn't an extension of their careers. It was a refuge from them. Both men, in their own ways, stepped away from the treadmill of auditions, premieres, and press tours to live life on their own terms. And they did it at a time when such choices weren't common. Today, it's trendy for celebrities to have ranches or talk about getting out of the city. But in the 80s and 90s, actors were expected to stay close to Los Angeles if they wanted steady work. The idea of choosing rural life over constant networking would have seemed impractical, even foolish to many people in the industry. The funny thing is, hardly anyone talked about these parallels back then. The media tended to box them into separate narratives. Selleck was the TV guy trying to break into movies, and Elliott was the rugged character actor who played the same type of role again and again. But both were actually building something much deeper. They were redefining success, showing that it didn't have to mean non-stop work or chasing bigger paychecks. And let's be honest, owning and maintaining a ranch isn't just a rich man's hobby. It's hard work. You have to deal with unpredictable weather, rising costs, and constant maintenance. The land doesn't care about your fame. Animals need to be fed, trees need to be tended, and fences need fixing. It ties you down, in a good way. You can't just drop everything and fly off to shoot a movie halfway around the world. Choosing that life means saying no to a lot of other opportunities. That's exactly what Selleck did. Over the years, he turned down countless movie offers because they didn't fit around his life. He didn't want to spend months away from his family or his land. His long run on Blue Bloods, more than a decade now, made sense partly because it gave him balance. The show was filmed in New York, which meant he could work hard for part of the year, then head back home to California to take care of his ranch. That balance became the foundation of his happiness. When you look at Sam Elliott's choices through that same lens, they suddenly make perfect sense. He wasn't trying and failing to become a blockbuster star. He was making decisions that fit the life he wanted. Smaller roles, supporting characters, slower pace. He built a body of work that gave him a steady income, creative fulfillment, and time to live. The fame came in smaller waves, but it was steady, respected, and deeply connected to who he was. By the 1990s, that approach started paying off in a big way. Elliott's role in Tombstone caught everyone's attention. Even though he wasn't the lead, people walked out talking about him. His voice, his presence, the way he carried a scene, it all stuck. And then came the voice work, commercials, narrations, the kind of thing that made people recognize him instantly, even when they couldn't place his face. He became this quiet legend, someone whose name carried a sense of trust and authenticity. Selleck, on the other hand, found a similar rhythm in television. He became known not just as a leading man, but as someone who could sustain a long, meaningful career without burning out or constantly reinventing himself. His choices started to look less like missed opportunities and more like deliberate steps toward longevity and peace. And there's something else worth noting. Hollywood can be a competitive, ego-driven place. Two actors of similar age, similar type, and similar appeal would normally be framed as rivals. Yet Selleck and Elliott never fit into that narrative. They respected each other. They occasionally worked together. They even seemed to understand each other without needing to discuss it openly. That kind of quiet camaraderie, built not on proximity but on similarity of spirit, is rare in an industry that thrives on comparison. And even though they rarely talked about it publicly, people could sense there was something deeper between them, a shared understanding, a kind of quiet brotherhood built not on fame, but on the choices they made away from it. By the time the two reached their later years, that unspoken bond had become part of their legacy. And it wasn't until much later, decades after their first ballet class at 20th Century Fox, that Selleck finally opened up about how he really felt about Sam Elliott and what that friendship had meant all along. What Selleck finally admitted. After decades of crossing paths, sharing projects, and being compared by fans and the press, Tom Selleck finally spoke openly about his relationship with Sam Elliott in his 2024 memoir and a few interviews. He didn't make it a big, dramatic reveal or a sentimental confession, just a few calm words that carried weight. He said that Sam had been a friend for a long time. Simple, but the tone behind it said more than the sentence itself ever could. Still, what stood out wasn't just what Selleck said, it was how he said it, and what he chose to include around it. When he talked about actors like Elliott and Kevin Costner, he credited them with keeping Westerns alive during the years when Hollywood had moved on from the genre. It wasn't just casual praise. Selleck has always cared deeply about the tradition of Western storytelling. The open landscapes, the quiet strength, the moral simplicity. To him, Elliott wasn't just another actor who wore a cowboy hat well. He was someone who had helped preserve a piece of American film culture when it was out of fashion to do so. But there's more underneath that respect. When you look closely at how Selleck talks about Elliott, it's clear he sees him as a kind of mirror, or maybe even a quiet guide. Every major choice Selleck made in his career, from turning down Indiana Jones to choosing life on a ranch, carries traces of the same principles Elliott embodied early on: authenticity, focus, and self-knowledge. Elliott had figured out who he was long before most young actors even knew what kind of career they wanted. He didn't chase trends. He didn't stretch himself into roles that didn't fit. And he didn't let fame rewrite his values. Selleck noticed that early, way back in those awkward Fox training days, and it stuck with him. And that's important, because Selleck's own rise wasn't straightforward. When Magnum P1 made him a household name, the industry expected him to move fast, take every opportunity, grab big movies while the momentum was there. But he didn't. Instead, he made decisions that looked unusual from the outside. Decisions that later defined his entire life. The steady approach Elliott had always taken suddenly didn't look slow anymore. It looked deliberate. It looked wise. It looked sustainable. As Selleck settled into his success, he faced the same pressure most television stars confront. Prove you can make it in film, broaden your range, stay constantly visible. But he didn't feel the need to run after every offer. He was measured, thoughtful, and slow by choice. That was the part people often misunderstood. His restraint wasn't hesitation, it was intention. And that intention looked a lot like the philosophy Elliott had modeled from the beginning. Build a life that supports the work, not a career that consumes the life. By the time Selleck built his own steady, deliberate life, working, raising a family, and tending to his avocado ranch, it's not hard to see how much Elliott's example had quietly shaped him. It wasn't about copying him, but about finding reassurance that a grounded, authentic life in Hollywood wasn't just possible, it could actually be fulfilling. And every time Selleck talked about Elliott publicly, it carried that subtle acknowledgement. He never said Elliott inspired him outright, but the connection is easy to see when you line up their choices and the values behind them. Selleck was honest about the fact that they aren't close in the traditional sense. They don't talk all the time. They don't see each other regularly. Work and distance got in the way. Elliott works mostly out west, and Selleck spends much of his time filming in New York. Their friendship isn't built on constant contact. It's built on a shared understanding that doesn't really need words. It's the kind of bond that forms quietly over years of watching how someone else carries themselves and thinking, yeah, that makes sense to me too. That's probably why Selleck chose to write about Elliott in his memoir at all. He didn't mention everyone he's worked with. The book was selective, personal. So the fact that Elliott earned a place in it says a lot about how deeply Selleck values what that friendship represents. He didn't praise Elliott for fame or charm or popularity. He praised him for consistency, for staying true to himself, for being the same kind of man off-screen that he appeared to be on-screen. And it's worth noting that Selleck has worked with some of Hollywood's biggest names, actors who have headlined major films and shaped entire eras. Yet, when it came time to reflect publicly, he focused on Elliott, someone who built his career through slow, steady steps, someone who didn't rely on spectacle or trends to stay relevant. That choice says a lot about who Selleck sees as a peer worth honoring. It's rare for an actor to admire another actor not for success, but for self-knowledge. And that's exactly what Selleck kept circling back to, that Elliott always knew who he was. That groundedness is something Selleck spent years building for himself, and Elliott had it from the beginning. It's no small thing to see your own strengths reflected in someone you respect. It's even rarer to realize that their path helped you trust your own. Another layer to this is how both men handled fame. Elliott's recognition came slowly, carried by his voice work, his character roles, and his steady presence in films that valued subtlety over showmanship. Selleck's fame arrived quickly and loudly, with international attention and heavy expectations. Yet both ended up choosing quieter lives. That parallel alone explains why their bond, even from a distance, feels so meaningful. They both walked toward the same kind of peace, even if they started from opposite ends. When you put all the pieces together, it becomes clear that Elliott wasn't just a friend or co-star to Selleck. He was a quiet kind of validation, proof that the slower, more intentional path could work. The choice to value integrity over fame, peace over attention, and longevity over hype. And even though Selleck never framed it dramatically, the undertone is unmistakable. Elliott had shown him, years earlier, the kind of career and life a man could build if he stayed true to who he was, even when Hollywood pushed him to be someone else. It's the kind of truth Selleck didn't need to announce loudly. It was already there in the life he built, the choices he made, and the way he eventually told the story. If you enjoyed uncovering the truth behind their bond, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that dig deeper than the headlines. And tell us in the comments, between Selleck and Elliott, whose style or career do you connect with more? We'd love to hear your take.